The mirror caught me in half light. The edges of my suit jacket, a little worn, but pressed as sharply as I could make them. It was the only proper suit I owned, bought secondhand years ago. But today, it felt like armor. I smoothed the fabric over my knees as I waited in the lobby of Hale Manufacturing, listening to the faint hum of machines somewhere in the building. My heart beat faster with every passing second. But when they finally called my name, a strange calm settled over me. The interview wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. Questions about my welding certifications, about safety protocols, about how I handled pressure. For once, I had clear answers. I spoke about late nights in training, about adapting quickly on the floor. I told them the truth, that I wanted something steady, somewhere I could build a future without having to move every 6 months. When the panel nodded and exchanged small glances, I allowed myself the tiniest breath of relief. An hour later, I walked back across the parking lot, sun glaring against the hood of my car, and for the first time in months, I felt taller. They hadn't given me the job outright, but their words, "We'll be in touch soon. Expect good news," still rang in my ears. I gripped the steering wheel, imagining the look on Mom's face when I told her. She'd pretend to act surprised, but I hoped I might see a flicker of pride beneath it. On the drive home, I rehearsed the conversation in my head, how I'd start with the small details, how prepared I felt, how confident they seemed, and then saved the good news for last. I pictured her setting down her phone for once, maybe even smiling. By the time I turned onto our street, my chest was full of anticipation, almost enough to drown out the faint unease I'd learned long ago never to ignore. I parked at the curb, straightened my jacket one last time, and walked toward the front door. That was when I noticed something strange about the upstairs window. The curtains were drawn tight, even though Mom always left them open for the light. I pushed the door open, the sound of my heels against the hardwood echoing in the stillness. The house smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, as if Mom had just cleaned. I called out, trying to keep my voice bright. "Mom, I think I nailed it. They said to expect good news." No answer. I walked down the hall, the nerves of the interview still buzzing through me, until I reached my room. That's when I stopped cold. The door. My door had a shiny new brass lock on it. Not just a replacement knob, but a deadbolt. My breath caught, confused at first, then unsettled. I rattled the handle, but it didn't budge. "Mom?" My voice cracked on the second try. She appeared at the end of the hallway, arms folded around herself, phone still in her hand. For a moment, I waited for her to explain it was temporary, that there had been some mistake. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She stared at the floor, then at the wall, then back at her phone. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than air. "You don't live here anymore. Get out." I blinked as if maybe I'd misheard. "What? Mom?" A voice behind me cut through. "Look at the parasite, folks, caught live." I turned and saw Evan holding his phone high, streaming to whoever would watch. His grin was wide, desperate, like someone putting on a show too big for the stage. Before I could speak, Dad stepped out from the kitchen. His face was stone. "Real adults don't mooch at 28, Karina. Time to grow up." Through the open front door, I noticed shadows across the street. Neighbors watching, phones out, recording the spectacle. My chest burned, but no words came. I stood there, the weight of their rejection pressing down, and realized I had nowhere in this house that was mine anymore. I turned back to the door, gripping the useless handle, and felt something inside me begin to break. Evan angled his phone toward me, his voice sliding into the fake energy he used for his streams. "Here she is, folks. The family freeloader, finally getting what she deserves." He kicked one of the garbage bags at his feet, and my suitcase tumbled out, the zipper splitting so socks and paper scattered onto the grass. His laugh was sharp, but behind it, I caught the nervous edge of someone desperate to hold an audience. I bent down, gathering what I could, my hands trembling, but steady enough to fold the clothes back inside. Each time I reached for something, Evan narrated like it was sport. "See, she's really leaving. Guess adulthood came calling after all." Neighbors stood frozen across the street, some whispering, some filming. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I placed each piece carefully in the trunk of my car, as if deliberate movements could keep me from unraveling. Victor came down the steps then, his jaw tight. Without a word, he threw a set of keys at me. The edge struck my cheek with a dull thud before clattering to the driveway. "Take your junk and get out," he barked. "You're not our daughter anymore." I rubbed the spot on my face, then bent down to pick up the keys. Evan was still streaming, waiting for some meltdown. Instead, I slid the last bag into the trunk, closed it gently, and walked to the driver's seat. The street blurred as I pulled away, the sound of Evan's voice fading behind me. I drove without direction, the streets folding into one another, until the familiar glow of Lena's apartment complex came into view. She opened the door without questions, just a quiet nod and space to breathe. As I set my torn suitcase on the floor, my eyes caught the envelope at the bottom of the side pocket, the one Esther had pressed into my hand before she died. I had promised myself I'd never open it unless things got bad. Now, the weight of it sat heavy in my lap, daring me to break that promise. I sat on Lena's couch with the envelope balanced across my knees. The paper, already softened at the edges from months of handling, but never opening. My fingers hovered for a long moment before I finally slid a nail under the flap. It opened cleanly, like it had been waiting. Inside was a folded letter in Esther's unmistakable hand, the careful cursive she had used on recipe cards and birthday notes. Along with it came several notarized documents and a business card from a downtown law office. My chest tightened before I even read the first line. "Karina," it began. "If you are reading this, then what I feared has already come true. I could not protect you from them while I was alive, so I've done what I can now." My throat closed as I scanned the lines. She had placed part of the family home in my name, along with a share of the lakeside cabin and percentages of Victor's commercial property. Every page was signed, stamped, and bound in legal weight. Her final sentence read, "When they forget your worth, this will remind them." I leaned back, clutching the paper, and memory pulled me backward. Esther, standing at the garden gate when I was 10, telling me not to let the neighbor's boy push me around. Esther, pressing my hand to the table after my first welding burn, whispering, "Pain means you're learning, not that you're weak." Esther, showing me how to balance a checkbook with patience Mom never gave me. She had always believed in me when no one else did. And even in death, she hadn't stopped. The pages shook in my hands, not from grief, but from something sharper, steadier, clarity. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, slid the lawyer's card into my pocket, and knew I couldn't leave them buried anymore. By morning, I was ready to make a call. The next afternoon, I sat in the waiting room of Dorset and Lane, the envelope pressed against my lap like it was part of me. The building was old stone, ivy curling up its sides, the kind of place that looked built to withstand storms. When the receptionist called my name, I rose with legs that felt unsteady, but determined. Mr. Dorset's office smelled faintly of leather and old paper. He was gray-haired, deliberate in his movements, and when he extended his hand, I caught a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I remember you," he said softly. "Your grandmother brought you here once. You carried a red sketchbook. Wouldn't put it down." I managed a small nod, sliding the envelope across his desk. He took his time, opening each page carefully, reading line by line with the precision of someone who had built a career on details. My pulse thudded with every turn of the paper. When he finally looked up, his expression was firm. "It's all valid, every signature, every notarization, binding and enforceable." He tapped the edge of one page. "Your grandmother made sure of it." The air left my chest in a rush I hadn't realized I'd been holding, but then he leaned back, folding his hands. "There's something more. These properties, particularly the lake cabin and the commercial building, have been generating rental income. I reviewed the records this morning. Your share, based on the trust, has not been disclosed to you." My mouth went dry. "How much?" He glanced at his notes. "Just over $50,000 over the last 3 years. That money is yours, Karina. They've been keeping it from you." The number echoed in my head like steel striking steel. 50,000 years of pretending I was a burden, when all along they were profiting behind my back. My hands shook, but not from fear, from clarity. Mr. Dorset slid the documents back toward me. The decision is yours. We can proceed quietly, or we can challenge them directly. I gathered the papers with deliberate care, meeting his steady gaze. Proceed, I said. He nodded once. Then let's begin. That night, the first wave of messages lit up my phone. By the time I left Mr. Dorset's office, my phone was already buzzing. First, it was a string of texts from Evan. Hey, don't be mad. The stream wasn't personal. It was just content. You know how the algorithm is. Then a voicemail from Dad, his tone clipped and dismissive. You're making this bigger than it is. No drama. Just come home and talk like an adult. An hour later, Mom's name filled my screen. Her message swinging the other way. Please, sweetheart, don't do this. We can work it out as a family. The flood didn't stop. Every few minutes, another call, another notification, some angry, some pleading. None of them apologies. I forwarded them all to Mr. Dorset and left the phone face down on the table. That Friday evening, just after sunset, the pounding started. 3 sharp knocks rattled my apartment door, followed by Mom's voice, higher than usual. Karina, honey, please open up. We just want to talk. I stayed seated on the couch, eyes fixed on the small live feed from the security camera. There they were, Mom, clutching a tissue, Dad, standing stiff and red-faced, Evan, off to the side, holding his phone like he couldn't resist documenting even this. Open the door, Dad barked. You're acting like a child. I pressed the intercom button. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I spoke. All communication goes through my lawyer. You've been informed of this already. Silence. Mom's shoulders sagged. Then she tried again, softer. You don't have to do this. We'll delete the videos. We'll fix everything. Just let us in. Just the 4 of us. Through the lens, I saw Evan glance at his phone, then tilt it just slightly, as though recording without her noticing. The sight tightened my stomach, but it also steeled me. If you remain here, I said clearly, I will contact building security. Dad's face darkened, his jaw clenching hard enough to tremble. Mom dabbed at her eyes. Evan shifted uncomfortably, but kept filming. After a long minute, they turned and walked away without another word. Only when the hallway was empty did I let my hands shake. I locked the deadbolt, sat back down, and opened my laptop to find an email from Mr. Dorset waiting. The days that followed carried a different kind of noise. Evan's channel, once a steady stream of manufactured outrage and shallow stunts, began to fracture. Clips of my eviction circulated out of context, then back in full, until even strangers online were asking why he thought humiliating his sister counted as content. Comments piled up. Sponsors quietly withdrew, and his follower count started to sink. His voice online grew louder in response, but the desperation showed. Dad wasn't spared either. When the banks reviewed property documents for a pending loan, the trust surfaced. Without my signature, his leverage collapsed. A client pulled out of a project days later, citing instability. I heard about it only because Mr. Dorset forwarded the notices with quiet efficiency. For a man like Victor Hale, reputation was currency, and now it was depreciating fast. Mom's messages shifted with the tides. One morning, she texted, I can't sleep knowing you're angry at me. That night, how could you drag us through this? The next day, please, sweetheart, I'll do anything if you'll just talk to me. Guilt, then blame, then bargaining, cycling so quickly it blurred into static. I kept my phone on silent and reached for a notebook instead. The first line came slow, but then they kept coming. Not rage, not revenge, just observations. What silence revealed, what their words masked, what I had mistaken for love. Esther's voice returned to me as I wrote, not in sound, but memory. She had once held my hand after a fight with Evan and said, they'll call it betrayal when you stop letting them use you. Let them. It only means you finally learned. I closed the notebook, the quiet around me steady, and realized silence was no longer emptiness. It was power. The next morning, Mr. Dorset called with news of their counteroffer. Mr. Dorset's office felt different that morning, heavier somehow, as though even the air knew what was coming. Across the polished table sat their lawyer, a man I'd never met, flanked by a stack of papers and a thin, practiced smile. He slid the first offer across, as if it were generous. "The family is prepared to transfer full ownership of the lake cabin to your client," he said smoothly, "provided she forego any claims to past or future income from the commercial property." I looked down at the page. No repayment, no accountability, just a symbolic gesture wrapped in legal language. My chest tightened, but not with doubt, with resolve. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "Here's what I want." I listed them one by one, steady, as if I had rehearsed them for months. A formal payment plan for all unpaid rent, a third-party property management company overseeing income from both properties, and, most important, a written admission of financial misrepresentation signed by each of them. The lawyer's smile faltered. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "That's ambitious." Across the table, Victor's face reddened. "Absolutely not. We're not signing some confession to satisfy her ego." Evan scoffed, muttering about how ridiculous this all was. Diana pressed a tissue to her face, whispering that it wasn't supposed to go this far. I folded my hands on the table and met each of their eyes in turn. "Then we don't have a deal." The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of the clock on the wall. Victor slammed his fist once against the arm of his chair, muttering curses under his breath. But even his anger couldn't shift the fact that their position was crumbling. By the end of the meeting, the lawyer gathered the papers and nodded stiffly. "We'll concede to her terms." When the final draft was placed before me, I read it carefully, then added one line above my signature in my own handwriting. "Truth isn't betrayal. It's what remains when the performance ends." The pen barely left the page before I knew nothing would be the same again. The lease was mine, signed with my name alone. The apartment wasn't much, uneven floorboards, a draft in the kitchen window that whistled when the wind picked up, but it was mine. No one could change the locks. No one could tell me I didn't belong. I filled the shelves Lena had cleared with the books I managed to salvage, their spines still bent from being shoved into garbage bags. I folded my clothes neatly into the narrow dresser and set my dented monitor on the desk like it was a crown jewel. Each piece was imperfect, but every one of them felt earned. The welding job wasn't glamorous, but each Friday, when the paycheck hit my account, I paid the rent directly from it. No borrowed money, no silent debts hanging over me. For the first time in years, I breathed without guilt. Pressing down point one afternoon, an envelope slid through the mail slot. Inside was the first repayment check, stapled to a short note written in Diana's familiar hand. "Please come back. Let's be a family again." I sat at the table and read it twice, waiting for the weight of her words to settle. But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the months I'd spent as their spectacle or the years they'd taken from me in silence. Only a plea to erase the past, as if forgetting counted for forgiveness. I folded the note back into the envelope, tucked it into the drawer, and left the check untouched on the counter. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't twist. There was nothing left to answer. That night, while unpacking the last box, I found the old drive Esther had given me. The external drive was scratched and old, the label nearly worn away. I hadn't touched it in years, but when I plugged it in, a folder blinked to life on the screen. Among the documents and photos was a file labeled simply Wave. I clicked it, and after a moment of static, her voice filled the room. "Hey kiddo, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. But I want you to remember something. Some people only value you when they can use you. And when you stop letting them, they'll call it betrayal. Let them. You just keep being you." The words landed like a steady hand on my shoulder. I leaned back, eyes closed, and let the sound wash over me. Tears came, but they weren't the hot, bitter kind I'd carried for weeks. They were quiet, releasing something I hadn't known I'd been holding. It wasn't grief that tightened my chest. It was peace. I copied the file to my computer, backed it up twice, and saved it to the cloud. I wouldn't lose her voice again. Then I opened my journal, added a final line beneath the others, and slid it into the drawer beside the drive. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, but it didn't feel empty. For the first time in my life, the space around me belonged wholly to me. No shadows of their judgment, no weight of their silence, Only my breath and Esther's steady reminder that I was enough. I closed the drawer gently, knowing that some voices never fade. Not when they teach you how to stand.